Lily had always loved Friday nights. There was something about the end of the workweek, the promise of freedom, that made her feel like anything was possible. After spending the evening at a bar with a few friends, laughing, chatting, and letting the stress of the week melt away, she found herself at the curb, waiting for her Uber. The night air was cool, a refreshing contrast to the heat inside the crowded bar, and the soft hum of the city was oddly calming. She pulled out her phone and opened the Uber app, typing in her address. Her fingers tapped the screen absent-mindedly, feeling the exhaustion of the night creeping up on her. Lily had always been a bit of a night owl, but tonight she was more tired than usual. It had been a long week of deadlines, meetings, and constant emails, and the late-night drinks had only added to her fatigue. When the app notified her that her ride was only a minute away, she stepped off the curb and glanced around. The street was quieter now, fewer people, fewer cars, and a bit of that eerie stillness that always seemed to settle over the city as the night grew deeper. She'd noticed it before, that strange sense of loneliness that clung to the city after dark, but tonight it felt different, more unsettling. A black car pulled up in front of her. She checked the license plate quickly, just as her Uber app had instructed. The man behind the wheel looked up at her and gave a small wave, but there was something in his eyes that caught her attention. His gaze was a little too intense, as though he was studying her rather than simply acknowledging her presence. Lily hesitated for a second. She wasn't sure why, but something felt off about him. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't smile or greet her with any enthusiasm. He just stared at her with an impassive expression, his face lit only by the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Pushing aside the unease that was slowly creeping into her, Lily forced a smile and climbed into the back seat. "Hi," she said politely, settling in. "How's your night going?" The driver didn't respond immediately. His eyes flicked to her in the rearview mirror, but it was only for a brief moment before he returned his attention to the road. "It's fine," he muttered quietly, his voice low and distant. Lily wasn't one to make awkward small talk, so she let the silence stretch between them. It wasn't until the car began moving that she noticed something peculiar: the way he was driving. It wasn't reckless or fast, far from it, but there was a deliberateness to his movements, as though he was taking extra care to avoid any mistakes. He turned the steering wheel slowly, his eyes flicking to the side mirror every few seconds as if he were checking something, or maybe waiting for something. Lily shrugged it off, convincing herself that she was just overthinking things. It was late. She was tired. It had been a long week. Maybe she was just projecting her own feelings of unease onto a stranger. But as the car continued to roll through the city streets, the tension in the air only seemed to grow thicker. The streets around her were familiar, but as the driver took turns she didn't remember, she began to feel a twinge of worry. She'd been living in the city for years, and yet, tonight, the streets felt foreign. The buildings she passed seemed less like landmarks and more like shadows, their outlines blurry in the glow of the streetlights. She tried to ignore the growing anxiety in her chest. It wasn't uncommon for Uber drivers to take different routes from time to time, especially if they were trying to avoid traffic. But the further they drove, the more distant the familiar landmarks became. Lily checked the map on her phone to see how much longer the ride would take. The map showed a route she knew well, but the streets around her were completely unfamiliar. "I think you missed a turn," she said tentatively, trying to break the silence. The driver didn't answer right away. Instead, he flicked a glance at her through the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. He nodded slightly but didn't say a word. His grip on the steering wheel tightened for just a second before he turned his attention back to the road. Lily's unease grew. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice almost too quiet. She didn't want to sound alarmed, but the anxiety bubbling in her chest was hard to ignore. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "I know where I'm going." Lily frowned. She tried to relax, telling herself that maybe the driver was just being cautious or that the city had been restructured in some way that she wasn't aware of. But no matter how many times she tried to convince herself that there was a reasonable explanation for everything, the unease only deepened. She began to wonder if she had made a mistake. Should she have trusted her instincts and chosen another ride? The car turned onto an even quieter street with fewer lights, and the buildings around her seemed to grow larger, more imposing. The sound of her heartbeat echoed in her ears, louder than the hum of the engine. Lily's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything, but her thoughts kept circling back to the same conclusion: something wasn't right. She glanced at her phone again, willing it to show her that they were still on track, but the map had frozen. She tapped the screen, but nothing changed. The GPS, normally so reliable, seemed to be stuck, as though the signal had suddenly disappeared. "Excuse me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I think we're getting off track here. Can you check the map? The driver didn't answer, not immediately. But she saw him glance at her once more through the rearview mirror. This time his eyes lingered just a little too long. His face was expressionless, but there was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, something cold, distant, and hard to place. Lily opened her mouth to say something else, but before she could get the words out, the car abruptly slowed, coming to a stop at the edge of the street. They were in a part of the city she didn't recognize. There were no more familiar landmarks, just empty buildings and darkened windows. The driver didn't move. Lily's heart pounded in her chest and a wave of panic swept over her. She looked at the driver again, her voice trembling as she spoke. Where are we? For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound in the car was the soft whir of the engine. The driver turned his head slowly, his cold eyes locking with hers through the rearview mirror. His lips barely moved as he spoke. Don't worry, he said quietly, you're safe. But there was something in his voice that made her blood run cold. The car door was still locked, and she realized with a start that she couldn't remember the last time he had unlocked it. Lily's hand shook as she reached for the door handle, her mind screaming for her to get out, to run. But before she could make a move, the driver spoke again. Stay. Just stay a little longer. The words hung in the air, heavy with an unsettling calm. And that's when Lily realized she was no longer sure if she was in control of this ride, or if the driver was the one pulling the strings. Lily's fingers hovered over the door handle, her hand trembling as a wave of cold dread washed over her. The driver's eyes, reflected in the rearview mirror, were still locked onto hers. His words echoed in her ears, too calm, too soft to be reassuring. Stay. Just stay a little longer. She swallowed hard, her throat tight as if the air in the car had suddenly thickened. She glanced around, the once familiar world outside the windows now unfamiliar and distant. The city seemed to have disappeared, leaving only an eerie void behind. There was no sign of life, no other cars, no people, just an oppressive quiet that made her feel like she was the only one left in the world. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, the rhythmic thumping loud in her ears. She had to leave. She knew she had to, but something about the driver's cold demeanor kept her frozen in place. There was no reason for him to act like this. Nothing in his actions had seemed threatening, until now. His voice, so calm and steady, only made her feel more on edge. Where are we? She asked, trying to mask the panic in her voice. She was desperate to understand what was happening, to grasp some semblance of control in this unnerving situation. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gave a slight nod, his face unreadable as he glanced back at the road ahead. The car idled, the engine's hum filling the silence, and for a moment, Lily thought he might not respond at all. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. We're close. Just a few more minutes. His voice was low, deliberate, like he was carefully choosing each word. There was no warmth, no friendliness. It was all business, almost too much like business. His lack of emotion made Lily's stomach turn, and the hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Lily opened her mouth to ask more questions, but then she stopped herself. What good would it do? Every instinct in her was screaming to get out of the car, to run as fast as she could. But her body felt frozen, paralyzed by an unknown force. She could hear her breath coming faster now, the sound of it filling her ears like a constant drumbeat. The driver turned down another unfamiliar street. This time the road was narrow, lined with tall, looming buildings that seemed to close in on the car. The streetlights flickered weakly overhead, casting long, unsettling shadows that stretched across the pavement. Lily could feel the walls closing in on her, and the sense of isolation grew stronger with each turn. Her phone, still lying in her lap, buzzed again and Lily jumped, her heart leaping in her chest. She quickly glanced down at the screen, hoping for some distraction, for something that would remind her that she was still connected to the world outside this suffocating ride. It was a message from her best friend Clara. Everything okay? Are you home yet? Lily's fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between responding and doing something, anything, that would break the suffocating tension in the car. But what could she say? She didn't even know where she was, and she couldn't explain how wrong everything felt. She let out a shaky breath, trying to calm herself. Focus. You have to focus. Get out. Get out. She glanced up at the driver. His eyes were still on the road, and for a brief moment, his profile seemed almost peaceful, calm. But no one could be that calm in a moment like this. Her grip on her phone tightened, her pulse quickening as she sent a reply to Clara. I'm fine, just getting home. We'll talk soon. Lily couldn't help but wonder if she was lying to herself. Was she really okay? Her gut told her that something was horribly wrong, that the driver was hiding something. But what? The car continued down the dimly lit road, making another sharp turn. The street ahead seemed to stretch out forever, like the driver was taking her farther and farther from her familiar surroundings. She strained to see the road signs, but everything was fading into shadows. The world outside the windows was swallowed by darkness. Then, without warning, the car slowed to a stop. The sound of the engine cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence hanging in the air. Lily's breath hitched and she glanced up in alarm. "What are we doing here?" she asked, her voice shaky, barely above a whisper. The driver didn't respond. He remained silent, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unchanged. Lily's heart raced in her chest. This isn't right. This isn't right. Every instinct screamed at her to get out of the car, to run, but where? For a brief moment she considered bolting out of the car and running for help, but the street was deserted. She was alone in this strange place, and the shadows seemed to swallow her whole. What if she made things worse? What if it only made him angry? Her mind was spinning with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. The driver's head shifted slightly. He didn't turn to face her directly, but his eyes flickered to her in the rearview mirror, and for the first time, Lily saw something different in them. Something darker, something that sent a chill running through her veins. "Are you going to get out?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost teasing. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The question felt wrong, as if he was daring her to move, to make the wrong decision. Get out? She hadn't even thought of that until now. But there was no way she was getting out of this car, not when everything inside her screamed that it wasn't safe. "No," she answered quickly, her voice firm despite the panic that was rising inside her. "I want to go home. Now." The driver didn't respond. Instead, he stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The tension in the car grew unbearable, and Lily felt as though she might suffocate under the weight of it. She couldn't understand what he wanted, what game he was playing. Then, without warning, the driver reached for something hidden beneath his seat. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened as he slowly pulled a small metal object from the darkness of the floor. It gleamed faintly in the dim light. Lily's body went cold, and she instinctively pressed herself back against the seat, her pulse racing as the car seemed to grow smaller, closing in around her. She had no idea what he had in his hands, but she was certain of one thing: it wasn't good. "Please," Lily whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "What are you doing?" The driver didn't answer. Instead, he turned slightly toward her, the small object now clearly visible in his hand. Lily's eyes locked onto it, her heart hammering against her ribs. And that's when she saw it, the glint of something sharp. Lily's heart raced as her eyes locked onto the gleaming object in the driver's hand. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Her breath caught in her throat as the silence around her thickened, suffocating and cold. She had no idea what the driver was planning, but she knew one thing for certain. Whatever it wasn't good. The small metallic object gleamed in the dim light, its shape unfamiliar but undeniably sharp. Her mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other in a desperate scramble to make sense of what was happening. She could barely comprehend the situation. Was he going to harm her? Was this a robbery? A threat of something worse? Lily instinctively shrank back into her seat, the panic rising in her chest like a tidal wave. She pressed herself against the door, her fingers trembling as they clutched the handle. She couldn't let him see how terrified she was, but every part of her screamed at her to escape, to get out of this car before it was too late. The driver, still not looking directly at her, slowly raised the object in his hand. His face remained impassive, like a mask, revealing nothing of his intentions. Lily's thoughts spun faster now. What was he doing? Why had he stopped the car? She tried to speak, but her voice faltered. "What do you want from me?" The driver didn't answer immediately. His hands remained steady, his fingers gripping the object in an almost mechanical way. It was as if he was waiting for something, waiting for her to say or do the wrong thing. Lily's eyes darted around the car, looking for any kind of escape. She was trapped. The doors were locked and the windows seemed too high for her to climb out of. She considered screaming, but a deep, gnawing fear kept her silent. What if no one was nearby? What if there was no one to hear her? She had no idea how far they had gone from the city. No landmarks, no signs of life. It was just them in the dark, isolated from everything and everyone. Her mind flashed back to the messages from her friend, Clara. Home safe? She had lied. She was far from safe. She had no way of knowing what this man was capable of, and it was becoming clearer by the second that he wasn't just any ordinary driver. He was something else entirely, something darker, something dangerous. What What do you want from me? Her voice cracked, and she could feel her throat tighten with the rising tide of panic. Why did you bring me here? The driver's expression didn't change. He didn't even blink. His gaze never wavered, and it made Lily feel as though she was being slowly suffocated under the weight of his stare. I need to know if you're the one, he said, his voice still unnervingly calm. The one? The one for what? Lily asked, her confusion mounting. Nothing made sense anymore. She had no idea what he was talking about, but something about his words sent an icy shiver down her spine. He let out a low chuckle, but there was no humor in it. You'll understand soon enough. Lily felt like her world was slipping away, like the ground beneath her was falling out from under her. She had to escape. There was no more time to wait. Her body was shaking now, her breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't just a bad Uber ride. This wasn't an ordinary night out. She had stumbled into something much worse, something dark and dangerous. Her breath quickened as the panic surged within her. She had to act, now. Please, she said, her voice trembling. Just let me go. I don't know what you want, but I haven't done anything wrong. Please just let me out of the car. The driver's lips curved into a faint smile again, this time more unsettling than before. I told you. You'll understand soon enough. He paused as though considering her words. Then, he slowly lowered the object in his hand and placed it on the seat beside him. Lily's heart raced in her chest as she watched, but she knew better than to assume this was the end of whatever game he was playing. The driver reached for something else in the glove compartment. He didn't look at her, but she felt the weight of his presence shift as he rummaged through the compartment. Lily's mind was already planning her next move. She needed to be ready. If she got the chance, she would run, she would break free of this car no matter what. Her fingers instinctively curled around the door handle again, desperate for any sign that this nightmare might be ending. And then, just as she thought she might finally get the chance, he turned to face her again, a dark gleam in his eyes. You're not going anywhere, he said, his voice now sharp and cold. Lily's breath caught in her throat as the door behind her clicked shut, and the reality of her situation sank in. She was trapped. And that's when the headlights of another car appeared in the distance, drawing closer and closer. The road stretched endlessly before them, like an unbroken thread weaving through the darkness. Each turn felt deliberate, calculated. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pulled into a direction she could not control, a direction that would reveal things she was not prepared to understand. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the driver remained silent, his hands firmly gripping the wheel. His eyes never strayed from the road, his expression cold, calculating. The tension in the car thickened with each passing mile. It was as though they were entering a realm far removed from the ordinary world, far removed from everything Lily knew. She didn't know how much time had passed, but it felt like hours. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional shift of the driver's body. Lily sat motionless, barely breathing, trying to remain as still as possible. Her thoughts were clouded with confusion and fear, but something in her gut told her there was more to this situation than just a random, unsettling ride. She was caught in something much bigger. Her fingers clenched around the seat, the muscles in her body aching from the tension. She had to get out. She had to find a way to escape. But every attempt to speak had been met with chilling indifference. The driver was focused, unwavering in his resolve, as though he had already made up his mind about what would happen next. Suddenly, the car veered off the main road, its tires crunching over gravel as they entered what appeared to be an isolated, wooded area. Lily's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing with the possibilities. Where are we going? The trees loomed on either side of the car, their dark shapes casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into infinity. The path ahead seemed to narrow, the way forward becoming even more treacherous. Lily pressed herself further into the seat, feeling the cold sweat on her skin. The driver didn't slow down. If anything, he pushed the car harder, the tires screeching slightly as the vehicle accelerated. Lily's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, hoping for some sign of life, some indication that someone might be coming to her rescue. But there was nothing. Only the desolate darkness. What is this place? She whispered, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. She knew she couldn't keep silent much longer, but the words felt like they were stuck in her throat. The driver's gaze remained fixed on the road, his jaw tightening in a way that made her feel even more unsettled. But still he didn't answer her question. It was as if her words had no meaning to him, like she was nothing more than an afterthought. After a moment of unnerving silence, the car finally came to a stop. The engine idled, the hum of it vibrating through the car. Lily's heart skipped a beat as she looked around, the headlights illuminating only a small patch of the wilderness. There was no sign of any building, no signs of civilization at all. It was as though they were miles away from any sort of help. "Why have we stopped?" Lily asked, her voice laced with a mix of fear and frustration. The driver turned his head slightly, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "We're here." "Here?" Lily repeated, her voice rising in disbelief. "Where is here?" The driver didn't answer. He simply reached for something beside him on the passenger seat, an old, weathered map. He unrolled it slowly, his fingers brushing over the worn edges. Lily leaned forward, trying to get a better look, but the map was too far out of her reach. She shifted in her seat, her eyes narrowing. This was no ordinary ride. The map, the isolation, the strange way the driver had been acting, it was all part of something bigger. She wasn't just a random passenger in a car. She was part of something that she still couldn't comprehend. "What are you planning to do with me?" Lily's voice cracked as the words slipped out, her fear now palpable. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. "What is all of this?" The driver's gaze remained unreadable. He held the map in his hands like it was a precious relic, a piece of something larger that only he could understand. Lily could see the corners of his lips twitch as though he were fighting a smile. It made her stomach churn. "You'll understand soon enough," he said cryptically. The car door beside her creaked open with an unsettling sound. Lily's pulse quickened as she glanced at the door, then back at the driver. He made no attempt to move. He simply sat there, his hands still gripping the map, his focus entirely on the worn paper. What was going on? Her instincts screamed at her to stay inside the car, to not get out, but her curiosity had taken over. She had to know what was happening. She couldn't stay trapped in this mystery forever. Lily took a breath and reached for the door handle. With one swift motion, she opened the door and stepped out into the cold, damp air of the forest. The ground was soft underfoot, the earth squelching beneath her boots as she took a few hesitant steps away from the car. The air smelled thick with the scent of pine and decay. It was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the soft rustling of the leaves in the trees, as if they were whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. "Where are we?" Lily asked again, her voice shaking. But the driver didn't answer. He remained motionless, his eyes never leaving the map. Lily turned back to the car, then took another cautious step forward. The tension in the air was suffocating, but she couldn't turn back. She couldn't let herself be driven into whatever dark fate awaited her if she did. And then she saw it. Through the trees, barely visible in the darkness, another figure. A shadow, tall and unmoving, watching her. Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She knew in that instant that she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Lily's chest tightened, the air in the car growing heavier by the second. Her heart pounded with an intensity she hadn't known was possible. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to do something, anything, to break free from this nightmare. She couldn't understand how she had ended up here. Why was she being targeted? As the headlights of the approaching car grew larger, Lily's instincts told her that whatever was about to happen would change everything. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this a rescue, or had the driver planned for this too? Was this just another part of his twisted game? The vehicle behind them grew closer, the beams of light cutting through the darkness, illuminating the car's interior. The driver didn't look at the oncoming car. He simply stared straight ahead, his face unreadable, his eyes locked on the road. He was waiting for something, but Lily couldn't figure out what. The approaching car's headlights flashed, blinding her for a moment, and Lily squinted, her pulse racing. What if the driver wasn't going to stop? What if they both had no intention of letting her go? Suddenly, the car behind them honked, its horn loud and sharp, cutting through the oppressive silence like a jagged knife. Lily flinched, her body tensing at the unexpected sound. The driver's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his jaw clenching as his grip tightened. A flicker of unease passed through his expression, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. The car behind them honked again, louder this time, its headlights flashing rapidly. The driver's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing as he studied the car's movements. Then, without warning, he slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The car lurched forward, the engine roaring as they sped down the dark road, leaving the headlights behind. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she felt the sudden jolt of acceleration. What was he doing? She glanced back, but the other car was quickly fading into the distance. The driver's expression remained unchanged as the car gained speed, pushing further into the night. There was no sign of slowing down, no sign of stopping. Her heart began to race again as she realized they were not just speeding, they were running from something. The road ahead was long and desolate, stretching endlessly into the dark abyss. Lily could see nothing but the faint glow of the headlights cutting through the thick night air, casting long shadows against the barren landscape. Every twist and turn of the road felt like they were heading deeper into a world she didn't understand. As the car sped onward, the weight of the situation pressed down on Lily's chest. She had to do something, anything. Her mind screamed for a plan, for an escape, but every option seemed futile. She couldn't outrun him. She couldn't even call for help. Her phone, still clutched in her hand, was useless. She had no service, no way to communicate with the outside world. She glanced back again, half expecting to see the headlights of the other car reappear, but there was nothing. The world outside was as silent as ever, the isolation creeping up on her like a suffocating cloud. What was going on? She had no idea where she was, no idea where they were headed, or even what the driver intended to do once they reached their destination. Her mind raced as she replayed everything she'd experienced since getting into the car. The way he had acted so strangely, so unnervingly calm, his cryptic words. "You'll understand soon enough." Those words lingered in her mind, echoing like a warning she couldn't shake off. Then a flicker of something, an idea, a spark of clarity, struck her. There had to be a reason he wasn't just taking her to some remote location. He had been waiting for something or someone. She wasn't just a random passenger. She was part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. She had to know more. She had to understand what was happening. Her fingers curled into fists as a surge of determination flooded her chest. She wasn't going to let him control this anymore. She was going to take back whatever power she could. Lily took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had to be smart about this. She couldn't make a rash move. She couldn't let the driver know what she was planning. But every instinct in her told her that she couldn't just sit here and wait for whatever was coming next. She looked around the car, her eyes scanning every corner for anything that could help. Nothing. It was just the same bleak interior, the same oppressive silence. But then, her gaze landed on the small object the driver had placed on the seat earlier, the one she had seen him holding before. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she couldn't let it be near her. Could it be a weapon? The thought made her stomach twist in discomfort. She had to get rid of it somehow. Before she could act, the car jolted again, another sharp turn that threw her against the side of the seat. Her heart skipped a beat, and she grasped the armrest to steady herself. The road ahead was becoming even more twisted and unfamiliar, and the darkened landscape outside the windows seemed to swallow them whole. Lily glanced at the driver again. His face was focused, his expression set, as though he was intent on reaching a specific destination. Lily's chest tightened, the air in the car growing heavier by the second. Her heart pounded with an intensity she hadn't known was possible. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to do something, anything, to break free from this nightmare. She couldn't understand how she had ended up here. Why was she being targeted? As the headlights of the approaching car grew larger, Lily's instincts told her that whatever was about to happen would change everything. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this a rescue, or had the driver planned for this too? Was this just another part of his twisted game? The vehicle behind them grew closer, the beams of light cutting through the darkness, illuminating the car's interior. The driver didn't look at the oncoming car. He simply stared straight ahead, his face unreadable, his eyes locked on the road. He was waiting for something, but Lily couldn't figure out what. The approaching car's headlights flashed, blinding her for a moment, and Lily squinted, her pulse racing. What if the driver wasn't going to stop? What if they both had no intention of letting her go? Suddenly, the car behind them honked, its horn loud and sharp, cutting through the oppressive silence like a jagged knife. Lily flinched, her body tensing at the unexpected sound. The driver's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his jaw clenching as his grip tightened. A flicker of unease passed through his expression, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. The car behind them honked again, louder this time, its headlights flashing rapidly. The driver's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing as he studied the car's movements. Then, without warning, he slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The car lurched forward, the engine roaring as they sped down the dark road, leaving the headlights behind. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she felt the sudden jolt of acceleration. What was he doing? She glanced back, but the other car was quickly fading into the distance. The driver's expression remained unchanged as the car gained speed, pushing further into the night. There was no sign of slowing down, no sign of stopping. Her heart began to race again as she realized they were not just speeding, they were running from something. The road ahead was long and desolate, stretching endlessly into the dark abyss. Lily could see nothing but the faint glow of the headlights cutting through the thick night air, casting long shadows against the barren landscape. Every twist and turn of the road felt like they were heading deeper into a world she didn't understand. As the car sped onward, the weight of the situation pressed down on Lily's chest. She had to do something, anything. Her mind screamed for a plan, for an escape, but every option seemed futile. She couldn't outrun him. She couldn't even call for help. Her phone, still clutched in her hand, was useless. She had no service, no way to communicate with the outside world. She glanced back again, half expecting to see the headlights of the other car reappear, but there was nothing. The world outside was as silent as ever, the isolation creeping up on her like a suffocating cloud. What was going on? She had no idea where she was, no idea where they were headed, or even what the driver intended to do once they reached their destination. Her mind raced as she replayed everything she'd experienced since getting into the car. The way he had acted so strangely, so unnervingly calm, his cryptic words. "You'll understand soon enough." Those words lingered in her mind, echoing like a warning she couldn't shake off. Then, a flicker of something, an idea, a spark of clarity, struck her. There had to be a reason he wasn't just taking her to some remote location. He had been waiting for something or someone. She wasn't just a random passenger. She was part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. She had to know more. She had to understand what was happening. Her fingers curled into fists as a surge of determination flooded her chest. She wasn't going to let him control this anymore. She was going to take back whatever power she could. Lily took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had to be smart about this. She couldn't make a rash move. She couldn't let the driver know what she was planning. But every instinct in her told her that she couldn't just sit here and wait for whatever was coming next. She looked around the car, her eyes scanning every corner for anything that could help. Nothing. It was just the same bleak interior, the same oppressive silence. But then, her gaze landed on the small object the driver had placed on the seat earlier, the one she had seen him holding before. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she couldn't let it be near her. Could it be a weapon? The thought made her stomach twist in discomfort. She had to get rid of it somehow. Before she could act, the car jolted again, another sharp turn that threw her against the side of the seat. Her heart skipped a beat, and she grasped the armrest to steady herself. The road ahead was becoming even more twisted and unfamiliar, and the darkened landscape outside the windows seemed to swallow them whole. Lily glanced at the driver again. His face was focused, his expression set, as though he was intent on reaching a specific destination.